Hello, and welcome to Dissecting Philosophy with Dr McDonald. In this episode, I'll be reading and discussing the section At Noontide in Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and I also have a wee brief discussion of the film Yes Man and how it fits into the section. So let's get started. At Noontide. And Zarathustra ran and found no one else, and was alone, and found himself again and again, and enjoyed and relished his solitude, and thought of good things, for hours on end. About the hour of noon, however, when the sun stood exactly over Zarathustra's head, he passed by an old gnarled and crooked tree, which was embraced around by the abundant love of a vine and hidden from itself. From the vine an abundance of yellow grapes hung down to the wanderer. Then he felt a desire to relive a little thirst and to pluck himself a grape. But when he had already extended his arm to do so, he felt an even greater desire to do something else, that is, to lie down beside the tree at the hour of perfection, noon, and sleep. That is, to lie down beside this tree at the hour of perfect noon, and sleep. This Zarathustra did, and no sooner had he lain down upon the ground in the stillness and secrecy of the multicolored grass, then he forgot his little thirst and fell asleep. For, as Zarathustra's saying has it, one thing is more necessary than another. Only his eyes remained open, for they were not wearied of seeing and admiring the tree and the love of the vine. In falling asleep, however, Zarathustra spoke thus to his heart: "Soft, soft, has the world not just become perfect? What has happened to me? As a delicate breeze, unseen, dances upon the smooth sea, light, light as a feather, thus does sleep dance upon me. My eye it does not close, my soul it leaves awake. It is light, truly light as a feather. It persuades me, I know not how. It inwardly touches me with a caressing hand. It compels me, yes, it compels me so that my soul stretches itself out. How lengthy and weary my soul has grown, my strange soul. Has a seventh day evening come to it just at noontide? Has it wandered too long blissfully among good and ripe things? It stretches itself out long, long, longer. It lies still, my strange soul. It has tasted too many good things. This golden sadness oppresses it. It makes a wry mouth. Like a ship that has entered its stillest bay, now it leans against the earth, weary of long voyages and uncertain seas. Is the earth not more faithful? As a ship lies against the shore, nestles against the shore, there it suffices for a spider to spin its thread out to it from the land. No stronger ropes are needed. As such a weary ship rests in the stillest bay, thus do I now rest close to the earth, faithful, trusting, waiting, fastened to it by the finest threads. O happiness, O happiness, would you sing, O my soul? you lie in the grass. But this is the secret, solemn hour, when no shepherd plays his flute. Take care, hot noontide sleeps upon the fields. Do not sing, soft, the world is perfect. Do not sing, you grass bird, O my soul, do not even whisper. Just see, soft, old noontide sleeps, it moves its mouth. Has it not just drunk a drop of happiness, an ancient brown drop of golden happiness, of golden wine? Something slides across it, its happiness laughs. Thus does a god laugh, soft. Happiness, how little attains happiness. Thus I spoke once, and thought myself wise, but it was a blasphemy. I have learned that now. Wise fools speak better. Precisely the least thing, the gentlest, lightest, the rustling of a lizard, a breath, a moment, a twinkling of the eye, little makes up the quality of the best happiness. Soft. What has happened to me? Listen. Has time flown away? Do I not fall? Have I not fallen? Listen into the well of eternity. What is happening to me? Still, is it stinging me? Alas, in the heart. In the heart. Oh, break, break heart, after such happiness, after such stinging. What? Has the world not just become perfect, round and ripe? O golden round ring, whither does it fly? Away after it, away, soft. And at this point Zarathustra stretched himself and felt that he was asleep. Up, he said to himself, up, sleeper, you noontide sleeper. Very well. Come on, old legs. It is time and past time. You have still a good way to go. You have slapped your fill. How long? Half an eternity? Very well. Come on, my old heart. For how long after such a sleep may you wake your fill? But then he fell asleep again, and his soul contracted him and resisted, and again lay down. Let me alone, soft. Has the world not just become perfect? Oh, perfect as a round golden ball. Get up, said Zarathustra, you little thief, you lazy bones. What? Still stretching, yawning, sighing, falling into deep wells? But who are you then, O my soul? And at this point he started for a ray of sunlight, and had glanced down from the sky onto his face. O sky above me, he said, sighing, and sat upright. Are you watching me? Are you listening to my strange soul? When will you drink this drop of dew that has fallen upon all earthly things? When will you drink this strange soul? When, well of eternity, serene and terrible noontide abyss, when will you drink my soul back into yourself? Thus spoke Zarathustra, and raised himself from his bed beside the tree, as from a strange intoxication, and behold, the sun was still standing straight above his head. One might not rightly gather from that, however, that Zarathustra had not been sleeping for long. So, at noontide, we have Zarathustra continue along his journey as he's been doing in part 4. But this time, instead of bumping into a particular character, and we've had various different ones at this point, we've had a wanderer, a mountain man, a man who loved to be covered in leeches, a prophet, a set of kings, instead of finding any one of those characters, he instead finds this old tree. And from the old tree, he sees that there's a vine, and feeling a bit thirsty, he wants to pluck a grape and eat it. But then he feels a bit tired and lies down and has a little nap. And in the midst of having a nap, he sort of has this daydream to himself and deeper reflection upon the world, nature, and happiness. And the main thing that Zarathustra says is, in relation to happiness, how little attains happiness. Thus I spoke once and thought myself wise, but it was a blasphemy. I have learned that now wise fools speak better. Precisely the least thing, the gentlest thing, lightest, the rustling of a lizard, a breath, a moment, a twinkling of the eye, little makes up the quality of the best happiness, soft. And that's really the key thing for this whole section, is that precisely it's the little things in life that make us precisely the happiest. Because, as he says there, what we initially think to ourselves is precisely the opposite of that. We think, in fact, happiness is incredibly unattainable, and the fact that it's almost impossible to attain. And this whole aspect of finding it hard to attain any form of happiness whatsoever goes back into the sort of traditional models and ideas for how to live a good life and how to achieve happiness. And it's quite easy to use an example there. If we go back to Plato, as I like going back to in using examples, happiness is precisely almost completely impossible to achieve in this actual life. And precisely, why is that the case? Because our bodily desires ultimately cause us to be in a state of continual want and continual need, and in doing so, we're a slave to them, and ultimately they cause us to suffer. And so, how do we get out of this state of misery and suffering, and how do you free yourself from this whole state? Plato says in Phaedo, this whole model set up upon an ethics based upon the soul and how to cleanse your soul and keep it pure in order for you to have the best afterlife possible. And so we have this then in Plato of the whole idea then of happiness is not based in the here and now, but rather what you do in the here and now will have an effect on your eventual happiness in the afterlife. And then we can precisely see that picked up and influential within organized religion, and of course precisely thinking of Christianity in the ways in which you have that comparable model there of making sure that your soul is in the best shape possible and that you live the best life possible, committing good actions in order for you to achieve heaven and avoid hell completely. And this then builds upon another idea about happiness, that it is only attained by a very small minority or select group of people. And in Plato, that would be specifically philosophers, because philosophers have this special way of looking at the world for Plato, because they're able to critically analyze and use their critical thinking skills in order to determine what is good for them and what to avoid And so they are able to keep their souls the purest above everyone else. And you can see from this how this whole aspect of adopting a certain method or model, and that model itself having its own tenets or ways in which you should have things to do and also have things to avoid in order to achieve the best form of the afterlife or the most perfect, happy life possible, is all very much influential, even out with Plato, just this whole idea of adopting a certain ethics. And another example of that that's also popped up in a previous episode is, of course, Epicurus, where Epicureanism is all about the here and now and enjoying life in the here and now. And how do you enjoy life the absolute best in the here and now? That is, of course, adopting the Epicurean way of life. And exactly what is that? To only focus on what is natural and necessary. And that is things that we need to live, and avoid anything that's unnecessary, so things we don't need. And as I said again in previous episodes, that's focused on one of the first forms of a vegetarian diet, because within Epicureanism you have the whole argument that only vegetables and dairy products would be things that we need, that is natural for us, and meat and fish would be something that would be argued to be unnecessary because we can live perfectly good lives on a vegetarian diet. And then that also has a knock-on effect to how you're going to live your life at the same time, because another thing that's going to be argued for to be natural is to have certain houses in the room that you need to live. So a bedroom, a bathroom, a kitchen, a living room. Above that, with your needs, do you need 3 bedrooms if you're just one person by themselves? Do you need 2 bathrooms for, again, the same argument if it's just a single person? No. So if those things are unnecessary, then you shouldn't look for anything that you don't need. And so again, we can just see from this 2 forms of achieving happiness, both based upon follow these specific tenets and you'll be able to live your life in the best way possible. But again, limited to the adoption of a very small group of people that precisely adopt those rules in the first place. And of course, there's dozens of other different models and ideas for all what is the best form of life to live. What is the ways in which we can achieve the maximum form of happiness? And of course, it doesn't all have to be focused upon a metaphysics or in the afterlife. As with Epicurus, it can focus upon the here and now, such as Aristotle and his idea in the book Nicomachean Ethics, which is based upon the whole idea there of eudaimonia as a concept, which is flourishing, is what it means. And so it's how do we achieve the best form in which we can flourish, not only as an individual, but as a society. And the main thing that Aristotle is going to say is, in the intellectual life is something that's going to be able to enable us to flourish and achieve the best life possible. And then another example is the Stoics, in which you have then various different people. Of course, one of the most famous examples is Marcus Aurelius in his book The Meditations, where he writes down this whole sort of sets of tenets of how he went about his life and tried to live a Stoic lifestyle. And another example is Seneca, who was the tutor of Emperor Nero. And one of the most interesting things we get out of the Stoics as well as their relation into psychology, because one of Seneca's main things that he wrote as well was on anger. And he wrote in order to try and help people overcome being really angry all the time. And what was his main line of argument in a really brief way here? He saw that people got really angry because something unexpectedly happened. And you can use great examples and the modern day examples as well to back up exactly what Seneca means there. You start off your day and it goes the worst way possible. You burn your toast, you accidentally get a stain on your clothes, and then it's that continual progression, and little by little you slowly become angrier. Or you can have, of course, those instances where you're just out driving and then some butthead just cuts you off, and then beeping your horn, angry, shaking your fist, and so on. All those are great ways to see exactly what Seneca means. All these little unexpected things happen, and that forces us to be angry. What is Seneca's way for us to try and be happier and not always fall into the trap of being angry every single time? Is preparing yourself for potential things and little unexpected things, and by waking up every day thinking to yourself, okay, I may burn the toast today, or the bus may run late, or someone who's very inconsiderate may cut me off. And from this, his line of argument is that if you prepare yourself for these little things, once they do happen, you expected it to happen, and then you're no longer shocked anymore if it does happen. And so you're able to get control over your anger. And so from these examples and very brief discussions and goings over of Aristotle and a tiny little bit of the Stoics there, we can see within all those given models that they all share this whole idea about happiness is only attainable by a select few, and this select few is, of course, the people who adhere to whatever model it is, be it Aristotelian, be it Epicurus, and so on. And then every model will have its own ethics for what you should do and for what you should avoid in order to be as happy as possible. And then this leads us back into the section where we can see precisely the impact of saying the opposite that Nietzsche does here. No longer is happiness almost impossible, or as he says there, how little attains happiness, but rather, as he says, precisely the least thing, the gentlest, lightest, the rustling of a lizard, a breath, a moment, a twinkling of the eye, little makes up the quality of the best happiness. So immediately from that, we can picture the idea of happiness is not something that's completely unattainable in the here and now. It's not based upon an afterlife whatsoever, because all the littlest things that's described, a breath, the twinkling of an eye, these are all things that we can experience in the here and now. And so very much happiness is based in the here and now. But it's not upon following an ethics either. It's not following someone's model or structure. Why is that? Because anybody can experience all these things. And in order for people to experience these things, you don't need to go and read the book. You don't need to have a deeper understanding of it. You don't need to have a deep critical reflection upon your actions. Nothing like that at all. In fact, happiness is something that is immediately available to absolutely everyone at every given moment. But what is the main problem with it? It happens on such a frequent occurrence that we miss it happening. All these little moments that happen, the breath, the twinkling of the eye, the rustling of the lizard. All these things are little novel things. Things that we'd normally take for granted, or only for the briefest moment appreciate them. Let's say for the rustling of a lizard, or rustling of the leaves on the trees when we're out for a nice walk in the woods and nature, and all the lovely nature sounds of the birds tweeting and so forth, and the trees and all that loveliness. But then, of course, it's only something we momentarily experience, all these little things. And why is that the case? Is because we focus so much on the other things that's going on within a daily life. Let's say you're only out walking through the woods to get to your work, for instance. Or the fact that you notice a twinkling in your partner's eyes, but then you go and grab the cup of tea, you go grab your breakfast and so on. It's all these fleeting moments that otherwise we don't pay attention to. All these novel moments. And that's precisely what makes up the beauty of this idea at the same time. It's precisely all these little things, these pleasant, fleeting moments that actually make up happiness in the first place to us. And it's interesting how much, upon reflection, those little moments can have in our daily lives as well. Like, oh, the moment I looked at their twinkling eyes. Oh, they look so beautiful today. I need to have a good old look into their eyes again when they're not looking. And hopefully they don't think I'm weird if I look too much. Or in the aspect of nature as well as, oh, that was such a great walk. I need to do that again sometime. It was so peaceful and so relaxing in comparison to my daily busy life that I have got going at the minute. And for this section, I found a great little article from the website medium.com, and the title of the article is How to Find Joy in the Small Things, and it's by Anthony Pinault. So let's read a little bit here of the article. A few nights ago, I was scouring Netflix's back catalogue in hope of finding a hidden gem. I was feeling unmotivated to do anything more constructive with my time. A slight sadness was creeping over me, and I just wanted a bit of escapism. My mum comes in, sees what I'm doing, and recommends that we watch The Report, a film that I've passed on many times. I told her as much, and when she asked me why, I couldn't think of an answer. I said something like, it's just not my type of film. I could have just moved on and continued following my own inclinations, but I felt a slight pang of guilt. I realized that I was being narrow-minded, so I took my mum's advice and we watched the film. It turned out that I really liked it. My inclinations, which I had been so reluctant to drop, were proven wrong. 2 hours flew by, and I was feeling distinctly different from before. The mild sadness was gone. The self-pity at my lack of motivation had gone. I hadn't achieved this change through escapism, as I'd been tempted to do. I'd achieved it by moving out of my comfort zone and saying yes to someone else's suggestion. As I went to bed that night, I felt at peace. I felt connected with the world, the topics of the film, and my mum. I was part of something bigger than just the negative thoughts running through my head. We'd only watched a film, but it mattered. Such a small thing, but such a big difference. Sharon Draper's words at the top of this story came to my mind as I lay in bed that night. Joy comes in sips, not gulps. And so there we have a fantastic example there of just taking just the smallest thing into account. Of course, one of those things that everybody can experience when you want to watch a film and somebody suggests you watch it and you're initially hesitant about it. Let's say you don't like the actors particularly, or it has a bad rating, or it just doesn't really grasp you in any way whatsoever. But then you become open-minded. You say, well, what's the harm in at least giving it a go? And at least it'll be something to do and something to watch on TV. And then, surprisingly, for Anthony there, he actually ended up enjoying the experience and enjoying the film that otherwise he thought was going to be complete rubbish and not worth his time whatsoever. And then in the article there, we also have Anthony joins this whole moment about enjoying the small things to saying yes to precisely all those little moments in your life at the same time, like the little suggestion of a movie. Or let's say we could also relate that to food, trying something different that otherwise we wouldn't have tried whatsoever. And Anthony in the article here relates this whole aspect of saying yes to all these little moments to a book written by British comedian Danny Wallace, and it's called Yes Man, which was then made into a movie based upon the same name, starring Jim Carrey and Zooey Deschanel. And some of the positive points that's picked out here by Anthony in this whole approach is that it says here that sometimes the little opportunities that fly at us each day can have the biggest impact. Just like those little things he's saying there about his film choice ultimately uplifted his whole mood and changed also his outlook. The next point that it says here is that you need to then have an open mind, otherwise life will just pass you by. And then it says probably some of the best things that have ever happened to you in life happen because you said yes to something, otherwise things just stay the same. So I think that's also a great point that it makes there as well, that it adds that little bit of novelty and difference into our life that otherwise would remain static because we're so much stuck within the bubble of what we like, and therefore everything that we don't like is just shoved into this whole other side. And just because we don't have an immediate awareness of something or an immediate agreement with something, we automatically just sort of shove it off to one side and sit contently just with everything that we normally go back to in terms of movies and foods and people who we listen to and so on. And all this is, of course, opening the door, let's say, breaking down the structure a little, allowing ourselves to become a little more open in our lives. So let's also go into the film Yes Man a little bit here. I think I've touched upon it in a previous episode as well, but since it's popped back up again here, it's good to go into it a little. And this will also nicely go back into the end of this section as well. So the plot summary as well is very small. It's from Google here. Carl, a lonely man with low self-esteem, participates in a self-help program that challenges him to say yes to everything in life for an entire year. And of course, that is Jim Carrey's character in the films called Carl. And initially, the whole thing sets off here. Now I'm going to Wikipedia to have a little look at the plot again. And one of the things that comes out of the movie as well is that he has a crisis because he's just had a divorce from his wife Stephanie, and so therefore he has an increasingly negative outlook on life and routinely ignores his friends. And so then one of his friends suggests that he goes to a motivational seminar, yes, with him, and then adopts from that the whole approach of saying yes. And so therefore we can see everything that Anthony was just saying in the article there about how that would help someone get out of his negative mindset. And of course, it leads to various hilarious situations as well in the film, because he just literally says yes to absolutely everything. But then, of course, comes in a problem. What happens when you want to say no? And one of the things that pops up towards the end of the film as well is that his ex-wife actually wants to sort of reignite the candle, is a good way of putting it, or try to have some sort of form of connection come back again. As it says here on the Wikipedia page for it, Carl receives a tearful phone call from Stephanie, whose new boyfriend has walked out on her, and when Carl goes to Stephanie's apartment to comfort her, she kisses him and asks him to spend the night with her. After Carl empathetically says no, his luck takes a turn for the worst and he decides to end his commitment to the covenant. So it's there the whole point of not wanting to fall back into the traps of his previous relationship that didn't work, and not wanting to go back to that person again, and that importance of saying no there. And then that goes back into how the movie rounds off. As it says here, Carl goes to the convention center and hides in the back seat of Terrence, who's the main person for the motivational speaker, hides in his convertible so that he can be begged to be released from the covenant. Carl emerges as Terrence drives off, and an oncoming vehicle collides with Terrence, resulting in the two being taken to hospital. After Carl recovers consciousness, Terrence tells Carl that the covenant was not real, but is merely a starting point to open up Carl's mind to other possibilities, not to permanently take his ability to say no away if he needed to. Freed from this restraint, Carl finds Allison, who is Zoe Deschanel's character in the film, and has been the love interest that he's had throughout the film, and then finds her teaching a sports photography lesson and admits that he's not ready to move in with her just yet, but that he genuinely loves her, and they reconcile with a kiss as Allison's students take pictures. Oh, lovely, lovely ending there. So we have that whole point that's sort of made towards the end of the section about how this whole approach is, of course, we've seen the benefits there, starting to dip our toes into it a little bit, all about the openness, allowing ourselves to become open to different approaches, perspectives, taking on things, and just allowing ourselves to try and enjoy different things that otherwise we wouldn't at all give time to whatsoever. But there's also this whole aspect of not becoming completely intoxicated with his whole yes and sort of life affirmation that's developed at the end of the section. As it says, "Thus spoke Zarathustra and raised himself from his bed beside the tree as a strange intoxication, and behold, the sun was still standing straight above his head." One might rightly gather from that, however, that Zarathustra had not been sleeping for long. And so we had there right at the end Zarathustra sort of tell himself to get up and shake himself to get out of this sort of slumber that he's gotten himself into right at the end. As we've all had the experience of course, when we've initially woken up and you're groggy and you've got to sort of shake yourself a little bit, metaphorically speaking at least, to get yourself out of bed. But we have this whole sense of intoxication and this whole idea that you need to have the importance of course, the no, and to deny things as well at the same time as being open, because there's that whole sense we get out of the film as well for yes man. If you constantly say yes all the time, then you're a complete buffoon at times as well. And we see this through certain silly things that occur and having occurred because he's always said yes to everything. And it's that importance of saying no. And we can see that again in the film, because he would have ended up back in a relationship that he didn't want to get back into if he said yes. And so we see that importance of the no equally there, because it's allowing also for that progress in his own life and allowing for a new relationship to take place and put the past behind him at the same time and move on. So equally, a no is as positive as a yes for someone's life, precisely to all encourage that whole progress and movement to happen. So that about wraps up another episode. And we've had a nice discussion all about how it's all focused upon the little things in life that make us happy. And in traditional philosophy, we have precisely those moves, either that happiness is something that's either completely unattainable in this life, and so it's focused upon a metaphysics in the afterlife, or that it's part of this select group and a specific ideology and ethics in order for someone to live their life happily. Here we have Nietzsche, neither a focus on the afterlife or upon a specific group or ethics, but rather it's open to everyone. Everyone can experience happiness. Why is this the case? Because happiness is focused precisely on the little things, the novel things that ultimately we would just pass by in our life. And we've had that great examples there from Anthony Pinol in the article, all about saying yes and trying to affirm all the little things at the same time, and trying to highlight there at the end also taking a step back and not becoming too overly enthusiastic or too overly part of affirming everything, and the importance also of no, and let's say from that as well the importance of that whole stepping back and critically reflecting upon things at the same time. So, next episode we'll be continuing on through Zarathustra into the next section called The Greeting. Many thanks for listening to the episode. I hope you enjoyed my discussion of the section At Noontide in Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Feel free to check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/dissecting philosophy. Tip me a coffee at ko-fi.com/dissecting philosophy. Drop me an email at my address dissectingphilosophy@gmail.com. And lastly, I can be found on Twitter at I am a rubberman. Many thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join me next time.